To a certain degree, our entire future may depend on learning to listen. Listen without assumptions or differences. As we wrap up our monthly exploration of finding our center, we welcome this morning Reverend David Miller. He's the senior minister of the UU congregation in Fairfax. What a blessing it is to have him here. He's also a collaborator in our Potomac partnership. Welcome this morning, Reverend David. Now, if Reverend David is here, you may be wondering who's in his pulpit this morning. Well, of course, that'd be our very own Reverend Nancy, sharing the spirit of the Potomac Partnership on the other side of the bridge. We're with them this morning together. It's such a joy to be in community with our siblings and our shared faith. Finding our center can be challenging, especially in the midst of changes and transformations. We've gone inward this month to find our center. We've also explored finding our center through community. And this morning, we'll explore and examine what it can mean to find our center as a people of collective faith. And this morning, Reverend David will take us on a historical and a theological journey. So, as we move into this time of exploration and discovery, we do this knowing that we belong to something much larger than any of us, yet created wholly by each one of us. And in that spirit, I invite you this morning to rise and greet your neighbor.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? I usually don't wear these things, so I just need to make sure. It was I was on the bridge this morning, and I looked over and I saw Reverend Nancy, and we waved as we I do want to take you a little bit on a historical and theological journey this morning. So we've sort of split things up a little bit, a little differently than a normal service. And I'd like to thank Cliff and the choir for indulging me in some of the songs that we never really sing. And I hope you will join us as well. And our opening hymn this morning is number 288, All Our Architects. And it was written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in the 1800s. Unitarians at that time had been documented as acting as heretical characters in the United States. Thank goodness that's not the case anymore. In 1832, for example, UU minister Charles Fullen and his wife Elise delighted house guests by presenting the pagan tradition from native Germany of a Christmas tree, something he brought with him after being exiled. Upon settling in Cambridge to become Harvard's first professor of German, he had met Emerson and other transcendentalists who motivated him to become a Unitarian minister, noted abolitionist and advocate for religious freedom. Other lyricists like Edward Sears, who wrote It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, were accused of writing lyrics that raised objections from a number of Christian conservatives of the time. Many people said contemptuously that Sears' hymn was just the sort of thing that you would expect from a Unitarian. They say proudly. Cliff will play it once through to familiarize the congregation and all of us. The choir, I believe, is going to rise and help out. And please rise in body and or in spirits, is what we say at Fairfax, to join in singing the hymn.
The Unitarian Universalist principles that we have known, the most recent iteration, are about 40 years old. It's a long time. I was in college 40 years ago. And we are a living tradition. And that means that as we learn more, we need to adjust what we're doing and do better. So there's a group of UUs who have been charged with coming up with a more marvelous rendition of our UU principles. And that work is still ongoing. You'll probably hear more about it today. But it reminded me of this story called The Most Marvelous Thing. It's by Ashley Spires, and I have adapted it wildly, so should be fun. So there was once a girl who really liked to make things. She liked to make art. She liked to make cookies. She liked to make dinner even. And she loved making gadgets. That was her favorite thing. So one day she got in her mind that she wanted to make the most marvelous thing. So she went to her bin of stuff that, I don't know, maybe you have lying around your house. Do you have like old circuits and disk drives and stuff? Maybe. Some rope, all sorts of fun things. And she worked really hard. She was snapping things together and working it out and just having the greatest time. And she made, it fell over. But she made this marvelous thing. She thought it was the most marvelous thing, and she tried to get it to work. And it did work for a little while, but she realized it wasn't what she was imagining in her head, because what she imagined in her head was really quite spectacular. So she went back to the drawing board, and she tried some more things, and she tried to use some things from here, but they were really too stuck together. So she came up with her next most marvelous thing. This one had a little screen with controls. And she showed it to her friends, and her friends were excited about it. They thought it was pretty cool, but she realized that that also wasn't quite the most marvelous thing. So she got some help from her friends. Her friends said, well, you can use this part for sure, and you can use maybe this part, looks kind of cool. This one up here. You can use that too. And we'll work together on this. So they worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. It's okay. It's okay, marvelous things can be put back together. And they came up with this really cool thing, this communication device. That was pretty cool. They put that on there, and they put this on here for decoration. And it was indeed, because they could talk to each other using this, it was pretty cool, the most marvelous thing. Yeah, see, the first thing didn't work anyway. So in the story, this relates to our UU principles. The first ones were great. They were fun, and they've been working for a long time, obviously. 40 years is a long time. But they needed to get better and better with input from people's friends. And they realized at the end that even though this was the most marvelous thing, it wasn't perfect. I mean, this didn't stay on very well. And it falls over, as you saw. So it wasn't the most perfect thing, but for now, it was the most marvelous thing. So now I invite children, youth, and their teachers to head to class, that way or that way.
Each week, we choose to come together in our fullness. We allow ourselves to be seen by one another, and we open our hearts, and we allow ourselves to be held in community. This morning, with sorrow, we share that longtime River Roader Virginia Richardson passed away near her family in Roswell, Georgia. Many of you know her as someone committed to this congregation. She was 90 years old, and in that life, she experienced and shared so much with those around her. She was a member of River Road since 1984, participating in the Board of Trustees, the Social Justice Council, the Central America Task Force. In the 80s, she housed a refugee from El Salvador in her house, sponsored by this church, and she also took many trips to El Salvador. She was beloved by so many people here, and will be long remembered by her legacy. As her son Dave wrote just after her passing, this church was a part of the blood that ran through her veins. Over the last 2 weeks, we found ourselves in frighteningly familiar spaces in our nation and our world. With our hearts still broken and fresh with the shock and the pain of 2 mass shootings back to back just last week, we carry the sorrow of yet another incident of police brutality. We light these candles this morning for all of the victims of the shootings in both Monterey Park and also Half Moon Bay, for their families and friends and loved ones who are also victims of this violence. We also light candles for each of the families that have been affected in this violence over the course of even 2023 and in 2022. We also light a candle for Tyree Nichols, his family, his loved ones, his community in my home state of Tennessee. We light a candle for all of the lives that were ended too soon by police brutality and by community violence, for all the families who have mourned, for all the lives that have been destroyed by this kind of violence. And we light a candle for what hasn't been spoken, for the things that we hold in our hearts, for the things that we bring here this morning, for our hearts that are broken, for our hearts that don't feel connected, for our hearts that never stopped being broken in this world. We invite hope, yes, and we make space for gratitude. But sometimes it's important as we come together in community to make space for what is hard, what is unspoken, what is difficult, and what is not being said. I now invite you into a place of stillness, of meditation, of prayer, perhaps rooting where you are, closing your eyes, lowering your gaze. We invite the Spirit of life into this presence this morning. We invite the Spirit of all that we carry with us, what's challenging, what's good, what we hold in celebration. So often we've gathered here in this space while the world seems to be raging and falling apart. We think to ourselves there's not enough candles that we could light to hold the pain. Sometimes we even feel numb because it happens so often. And that's why we invite the Spirit of life into this place. We come with grace in our hearts for the complexities of the systems that we belong to. Sometimes we come with anger in our hearts for things that just keep happening time and time and time again. Sometimes we come with hope in our hearts, that glimmer of hope, knowing that it's through us, through our actions, through what we're willing to commit, that maybe we can begin to turn things around, and yet the cycle starts over again. What can we do but make space? Our hearts are lifted up to God, facing pain, facing violence, those who face struggles that we may know nothing about. We lift our hearts to the families affected by the violence, families in Baltimore waking up to news of several shootings just overnight last night. And we know that coming together in this place gives us the strength and the capacity to gather our hearts and our spirits and find a way forward. May we do so together. May we hold one another in our sorrows and our joys. And may we find a way forward somehow, as we always have. May it be so. Blessed be.
For those of you who haven't studied our history, we come from what is known as a living tradition, a tradition that has practiced the thought that revelation is not sealed, and perhaps there is no such thing as revelation at all. Article 2 of the UUA Bylaws is the place where the statement lives about our agreement as an association to affirm and promote our Unitarian Universalist principles. It currently contains 7 principles, not that we haven't voted on the 8th principle, some of us have, and the 6 sources. Article 2 of the UUA Bylaws is probably not something that most of you have ever studied in deep detail, but it's an important shared understanding of what grounds us as UUs. Section C-15.1 parentheses C parentheses 4 of the UUA Bylaws, could you open your books to that right now? Of the UUA Bylaws reads, if no review and study process of Article 2 has occurred for a period of 15 years, the Board of Trustees shall appoint a commission to review Article 2 and to recommend appropriate revisions, if any, to the Board of Trustees. And that's what this is all about. Now, with that said, a minister friend of mine told me the other day that she was going to name her sermon on the subject, I like my living tradition just the way it is. And that I could feel free to use that in my sermon, so yes, I stole that, and I'm crediting her, Justine Sullivan. there's always been a struggle in our tradition between orthodoxy, or, quoting the Encyclopedia Britannica, orthodox, from Greek orthodoxis, of the right opinion, true doctrine, and its adherents, as opposed to what we use have often defined ourselves as, which is heretics, or those who don't have the right opinion and support heterodox or heretical doctrines, or holding a religious opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. It's hard to pinpoint the moment and that Unitarian or Universalist heretical theology was specifically uttered for the first time aloud. We often trace our roots back to the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE and the plight of Arius. The Arian doctrine concerned the unity of God as opposed to the Trinity, and Arius, in opposition to Athanasius and others who formed the council, believed that there was no Trinity. Arius believed that Jesus was created from God, not of God, and was subordinate to the Creator, not separate from. In other words, that the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit were not co-equal. This was heresy and became the outsider view to the official theology of the Church of Rome. No one ever called Arius a Unitarian. That was a derogatory name given to others later in history, but he did serve as a source of inspiration for Unitarian theology. We, Unitarians and Universalists, have always been filtering theology through the fire of reason and current culture to reflect on who we are theologically. If you take the beginning and belonging class that Reverend Abby, Reverend Nancy, and I teach, or any minister's UU 101 class, you can hear more about this in detail, but for today, I want to highlight a couple of moments where the balance of orthodoxy and heresy have clashed. In 1531, writings were published first titled The Errors of the Trinity, written by Unitarian Michael Servetus, in opposition to the orthodoxy of the day and in direct opposition to Calvinism under which he lived, denying the divinity of Jesus, this was in 1531, and affirming the unity of God. His writings claimed, as opposed to accepted belief, he said that he could not find one word about the Trinity, nor about its persons, nor about its essence, nor about its unity of substance, nor about one nature of several beings anywhere in the New Testament. For this he was martyred, and he was actually burned at the stake. Although I have some disagreements with our present-day writings, I do not intend to go that far today. I would like to maybe have a stake. No, I don't want to stake. The struggle between theological orthodoxy and heresy had a much bigger price tag in those days, but it set both Unitarianism and Universalism through periods in our history where we filtered what was currently accepted through the fire of thought, as Emerson might have said, and frequently professed that what was different than what was already been. And I return to the heresy of Unitarian theology because on July 15, 1838, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who had recently resigned from his Unitarian ministry at the Second Church in Boston, gave a speech to the graduating divinity school students at the academic institution that served as the Center for Unitarian Thought at the time, a place called Harvard Divinity School, where I could have gone if I wanted to. Why is that funny? I don't think that's funny. Instead of preaching based on currently accepted Unitarian thought, he proclaimed his belief and understanding about some of the main points of what turned out to be transcendentalism. He argued, quoting the great source of all knowledge, Wikipedia. Sorry, academics, I'm sorry, I'm quoting Wikipedia. He argued the moral intuition is a better guide to the moral sentiment than religious doctrine, and insisted upon the presence of true moral sentiment in each individual, while discounting the necessity of belief in the historical miracles of Jesus. Again quoting, Emerson anticipated a scholarly discussion, but was completely surprised by the negative outburst which followed. Attacks on Emerson quickly became personal. Thank goodness that doesn't happen nowadays. He was called an atheist. A negative comment in 1838, also not true today. The chief Unitarian periodical of the time, the Christian Examiner, stated that Emerson's comments, so far as they are intelligible, are utterly distasteful to the instructors of the school and to Unitarian ministers generally, by whom they are esteemed to be neither good divinity or good sense. Yes, ouch. Ralph Waldo was then kicked out of Harvard for 40 years. Not burned at the stake, but punishment nonetheless. All this was shortly followed by one of the major turning points in our theological history, Theodore Parker's sermon on the transient and the permanent in Christianity, which was even more heretical. Of the many things he said in that sermon, one was that he questioned supernatural rationalism, which meant questioning all the stories of Jesus' miracles, and that the great truths of Christianity rested on the shoulders of Jesus. He was supporting a new understanding of Christianity. He believed that the enduring and permanent truth of Christianity wasn't about the history or divinity of Jesus, or really even the need to include Scripture as the basis of it all. He believed it was based in the central thought that there was love of man and the love of God. Of course, that's the male-centric language of the time. Love of man, love of God. His Christianity required no other central grounding. So many have asked me through the years about the word love and how come we use it so often as our center point. And if you look at what's being proposed in Article 2, the Article 2 Commission, they have placed love at the center of their new, perhaps heretical interpretations of what is the center of our faith, and again, not so new for us. Universalist minister Jose Ballou also talked about love in his writings and preachings in the mid-19th century. And my colleague Douglas Taylor, Reverend Douglas Taylor, said it like this. He said, Hosea Ballou and other early proponents of universalism say that we are loved by God first. God's love is a given. Because of that love, we are led to live justly. God's love is not conditional or dependent on a certain set of rules being followed. God's love is not based on meeting a set of criteria first. Ballou uses a most simple anecdote to drive this point home. Your child has fallen in the mire, and her body and garments are defiled. You cleanse her and array her with clean robes. The query is, do you love your child because you have washed her, or did you wash her because you love her? The doctrine of universal salvation says, God will save everyone, all are loved, and none shall be removed from God's loving presence in the end. Hosea Ballou saw Jesus as a model for imitation, not a pivot of salvation history, but an arrow pointing the way to greater love and peace. Again, a pretty radical departure for the prevailing orthodoxy of its time, and frankly, of any time. And an incredibly strong theological thread that weaves its way through who we currently claim to be as Unitarian Universalists.
So just a little background on our next hymn, which is hymn number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. This hymn tune is from the British Isles, and it's perhaps best known as the folk song, The Water is Wide. The Water is Wide is about a break in relationships, the complexity of relationships, and it's a hard song. A song of sadness, of loss, of indignance, and still just a glimmer of hope. It's a perfect juxtaposition to the lyrics by Hobson of the song. In the original passage from the Bible in 1 Corinthians that Hobson mirrors with his text, it outlines all of the things that love is not. because it's so easy to mistake those things for love or to let those things obscure love and truth. And if you sink into it, love, even deep, holy, sacred love, fades like morning dew. What a heretical thought that it is if in this living faith, and it requires all of us, letting go, finding our resiliency, and grasping at hope. I invite the choir now to come forward to lead us in our next hymn, number 34, in the great hymnal, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. And please rise and join us as you are willing and able. You may be seated. Our traditions give life to so many of us, and we breathe life into our traditions. When we come together each week in this community, we give. And we give for our own reasons and also for shared reasons. We give from places of generosity. We give from places of responsibility. We give of our time. We give from our hearts. Whatever it is your reason for giving this morning, we do so tapping into places of deep gratitude for this living tradition that reaches beyond these walls, that with our hands and our hearts will grow us into the future. There are many ways to give. Each week we'll be passing the basket. You can go online and give there, and you can text to give at 73256. As the music is provided for us, please give as you are willing and able.
Tomorrow,
Thank you, choir. I'm a guest, so I get to do this. It's really lovely. Thank you so much. So where does all this leave us, is the question. There are so many more examples I could give of the clash between orthodoxy and heresy. And beyond that, there are also many more examples I could give about the illustration of the phrase, I like my living tradition the way it is. I won't ask for a show of hands. We do often find comfort and solace in what we have known. Change is hard. Change is also constant, however, and we often strive for things that we can hold on to, things that will ground us in the world that swirls around us. So what does all this mean then for the discussion we as Unitarian Universalists are now having about this revision? I want to close with a little story. Last month, I went to the first in-person holiday party with my ministerial support group in a number of years. I am blessed to be in a group with a truly outstanding selection of UU ministers. I will avoid any UU name dropping, Reverend Nancy. At some point in our gathering, someone brought up the Article 2 Study Commission work, and we had a really wide-ranging and fascinating discussion. And I want to tell you something. It changed my mind about how I was thinking about what was happening. I trusted that others also had thoughts about this, others who I love and respect, others that I opened my mind and heart to, and to tell you the truth, I'm still grappling with the proposed changes and frankly will be probably at least till General Assembly. So I come here today to say this. There is no monolithic denominational power ripping apart our theological grounding. There are people, ministers, lay leaders, and members of congregations, people really just like all of us, who've come together to try and understand what this time in history and this area of theological thought filtered through the fire of reason is telling us. Our understanding of these times in which we live and may live in the near future, who are trying to distill the best current way to capture and promote who we are now as Unitarian Universalists. This requires discussion. This requires an understanding from where we come. This requires an examination of who we are and who we aspire to be. It doesn't call us to orthodoxy. It calls us to having an open mind and an open heart. It calls us to maybe listening more, and I don't mean just to the sound of our own voices. It calls us to thoughtfully consider who we collectively are and who we aspire to be, not in 325 CE, not in 1838, not in 1961, but now in 2023. This is my prayer for your congregation, for our association, and for all of us, because if we truly do put love in the center, the point is not always to argue about the words. It's to figure out how to live them. May that be so, and amen.
Our final hymn this morning is number 1028 in your Till hymnal, The Fire of Commitment. In the UCC Church, what I like to call our cousins, God is still speaking. We could say the same thing of this closing hymn. The music is written by present-day composer Jason Shelton, and the lyrics are written by former UUCF minister Mary Catherine Mourn, who will actually be joining us next week on behalf of UUSC, our service committee. Hymn number 128, The Fire of Commitment, is centered in the Words and Deeds of Prophetic Persons section of the newest hymnal in our living tradition, or Singing the Journey. Published in 2006, the hymnal was the result of an effort to more closely reflect the current movements and our ever-shifting, still-speaking faith. In the foreword to that hymnal, Reverend Bill Sinkford says that our music can bind our community together. We struggle to define our shared faith, and for many of us, it's hard to say simply what Unitarian Universalism is. But the elements of worship that we share help tell us who we are as a religious people. The music of today's service, the hymns, the service music from Catherine and Laura, it shows a demonstration of how our songs let us know who we are and who we have been. More importantly, Reverend Bill Sinkford points out that the Till hymnal expresses a hope that our congregations find in this book music that will shape our communities and give new voice to our values as we move forward, supporting our deepening faith and a more effective voice for justice. Verse 3 in the hymn states, "From the days of youthful vision comes a deep and new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice." Won't you join me in our closing hymn, standing as you're willing and able while the choir comes forward to lead us in the fire of commitment.
Oh, there we go. What a joy it's been to be with you today. Yesterday, the Potomac Partnership boards all had a board retreat, and it was a wonderful experience. And I'm glad to say that we all get along pretty well, which is a nice thing. And I'm also grateful to be here today. I have been told that you do at the end of the service gratitudes. And so I would like to say that I'm grateful to the sound and audio and visual people. Thank you so much. I am grateful to the choir who sounds so good. I am grateful to my colleague, Reverend Amanda. No, I don't care. Reverend Amanda, she sings in harmony. I love it. It's fabulous. I'm grateful for Cliff. Now, Cliff has written some, I don't know, do you know this? He's written some really good music. We sing it. I like it. I'm going to do this from now on in my congregation. I really enjoy it. And I'm grateful to, I don't know the piano players. Schwa. Yes. I don't know how much they pay you, but we'll up it. No? I am grateful to the Article 2 Commission. It has been a very difficult job. We are in the midst of a very difficult time in our history, both as Unitarian Universalists and in this world. It's proved by what's happened time and time again, including the tragedies that we have seen over the past couple of weeks. For all of us, I know that we look at what we have done in the past and how we have been Unitarian Universalists, and it has provided all of us comfort. We have all joined that religion and faith tradition, whatever you want to say. But we aspire to be more, and to figure out how to be more is a difficult process. All I am asking, as you consider the Article 2 Commission work, is to keep an open mind and an open heart. We will have disagreements because we always do. Unitarian Universalists often have opinions. But as we head into General Assembly and as we head into the vote, let us stay a covenanted community based in love, knowing that we can disagree and still try to work it through, because what we're trying to do here is model and build beloved community. Thank you all for letting me be here today. It was lovely. Amen.